Omajnatimanasya Chansla Snakya Satsvamitam Yena Tasmai Sikave Namaha Shitchetaya Manopistam Staptam Yena Bhutales Vyanut Kadamam Dadanti Svapalantika Vandeyam Shiyo Shiyuda Padakam Nam Shigam Vaishnavam Sa Shirupam Sarjatam Sakanaragnatam Patam Tam Sachivam Sat Satvaitam Savdutam Parjana Saitam Shri Krishna Chaitanya Devam Shri Radha Krishna Padan Sakanalita Shivshakam Vitam Shah He Krishna Karuna Sindhu Dina Bandhu Jyatpate Gopesha Gopka Kanta Radha Kanta Namastate Tapta Kanchana Gauri Radhe Vrindavanashri Vishabhana Sutadevi Pranamama Hari Priye Pankha Kalpatarubhyascha Kripa Sindhubhevascha Patanam Pavanabhyo Vaishnavyo Namo Namah Jaya Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasadi Gaura Bhakta-vrinda Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Ram 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 Hare Hare Namo Vishnu Krishna Vastaya Bhutale Srimate Bhaktivedanta Swami Namane Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Pacharine Nirvishesha Srinyavadi Paskachani Satarani Srila Prabhupada Ki. So, today we will continue with the second chapter of the seventh canto. We have heard the Hiranyakashipu speaking philosophy, especially the knowledge of the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita, the section that deals with the characteristics of the soul. But it's not speaking this philosophy with the idea
Hare Krishna.
Hare Krishna Maharaj, we cannot hear you at the moment. I think everyone is experiencing the same problem.
Maharaj is on mute.
Yeah, so I don't know what happened, that something with the internet here, but I will change my internet setting. Just a moment, I will put it on my mobile phone to be sure that it does not happen again. I may be cut off again, but that's only for a short time. I'm coming back. Just a moment.
Already.
Okay. I'm now on another connection. That should be better. I'm going to share the screen again. And that's one. Okay. To set up again, just a moment. I'll be with you in a minute and we continue. And then shut this once. Meantime, 2 more students are joining, so I think we are complete now. That's good. Good. I think now we are ready. Everything's all right. We can start. So, as I said before, we are hearing this philosophy from Hiranyakasipu, who is preaching to his relatives, especially the knowledge of the 2nd chapter of Bhagavad Gita concerning the characteristics of the soul. But he's preaching with a certain purpose. He wants to get them rid, he wants to help them to get rid of their lamentation. But he's not preaching this to assure that they make spiritual advancement. No. That it's just to invoke detachment in their hearts. That so that they get, by giving up their attachments, to then they will stop lamenting. And now Hiranyakasipu is going to tell us a story. We are hearing from the instructions from someone who has played the role of a great demon. So we are hearing the instructions of Hiranyakasipu, but we may not forget that he plays this role. Is factually Jai. That's his position as a gatekeeper at Vaikuntha, but he came to this material world to help or to serve the Supreme Lord in his lila. Text 71. So the story. This story involves a discussion between Yamaraj and the friends of a dead person. So please, hear attentively. That's what Hiranyakasipu says, text 27. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Atrapyuda udaharantinam itihasam puratanam yamasya petabandhunam sanvadam tam nibodhata. In this regard, an example is given from an old history. Old history means a Purana. And Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, short purport, the Puranas are actual histories of bygone ages. So this involves a discourse between Yamaraj and a friend of a dead person. Please hear it attentively. So, text 28. In the state known as Ushinar, there was a celebrated king named Sujahya. When the king was killed in battle by his enemies, his kinsmen sat down around the dead body and began to lament the death of their friends. So if you see a dead body of a friend, as a devotee, what do you think? You think the person you love is not there anymore. Is not there anymore. At least that is how devotees see it. I've seen other reactions. that 28, yeah, 29 to 31. Now, his golden but jeweled armor smashed, his ornaments and garments fallen from their places, his hair scattered, and his eyes lusterless. The slain king lay on the battlefield, his entire body smeared with blood, his heart pierced by the arrows of the enemy. When he died, he wanted to show his prowess, and thus he had bitten his lip, and his teeth remained in that position. His beautiful lotus-like face was now black and covered with dust from the battlefield. His arms with his sword and other weapons were cut and broken. When the queens of the king of Ushinar saw their husband lying in that position, they began crying. "Oh Lord, now you have been killed, and we also have been killed." Repeating this words again and again, they fell down, pounding their breast at the feet of the dead king. So the soul has gone. The relatives, the queens, felt that there was no purpose anymore of their life, for their lives. It's 32. As the queens loudly cried, their tears glided down their breasts, becoming reddened by kumkuma power, and fell upon the lotus feet of their husband. Their hair became disarrayed, their ornaments fell, and in a way that evoked sympathy from the hearts of others. The queens began lamenting their husband's death. In a way that evoked sympathy from the hearts of others. It's a bit selfish, and we'll hear more about how this lamentation of these queens is quite selfish. There are other motives we will hear. Lamenting their husband's death, and now they will curse Providence. They will say, "Cruel Providence," text 33. "O Lord, you have now been removed by cruel Providence to a state beyond our sight. You had previously sustained the livelihood of the inhabitants of Ushinar, and thus they were happy. But your condition now is the cause of their unhappiness." Text 34, yeah. "O king, O hero, you were a very grateful husband and a most sincere friend of all of us. How shall we exist without you, O hero? Wherever you are going, please direct us, so that we may follow in your footsteps and engage again in your service. Let us go along with you." Text 35. "The time was appropriate for the body to be burned, but the queens, not allowing it to be taken away, continued lamenting for the dead body, which they kept on their laps. In the meantime, the sun completed its movements for setting in the west." So normally a body has to be created before the sun sets, but that could not happen now. They remained with the body attached. But of course, that in the last sentence of this purport, Srila Prabhupada writes, apparently the queens did not want to deliver the dead body for burning because they were afraid of dying with the dead body of their husband. So that was the custom when Pandu died untimely. Then Madri and Kunti, they made an agreement. Kunti would stay alive for taking care of the children, and Madri would enter the funeral pyre and die with her husband. So that is a sign of great religiosity or following Dharma. That, but later in Kali Yuga, the motives became different. That people became more selfish, and did not work anymore. That, like here, these queens, they think, yes, I will have to enter the funeral pyre. That's so better to delay it. So that's another selfish aspect of their lamentation. That so text 36. While the queens were lamenting for the dead body of the king, their loud cries were heard even from the abode of Yamaraj. Assuming the body of a boy, Yamaraj personally approached the relatives of the dead body and advised them as follows. That Srila Prabhupada in the purport, sometimes a living entity is forced to give up his body and enter another according to the judgment of Yamaraj. It is difficult, however, for the conditioned souls to enter another body unless the present dead body is annihilated through cremation or some other means. The living being has attachment for the present body and does not want to enter another, and thus in the interim he remains a ghost. If a living being who has already left his body has been pious, Yamaraj, just to give him relief, will give him another body. Since the living being in the body of the king has some attachment to this body, he was hovering as a ghost. And therefore Yamaraj, as a special consideration, approached the lamenting relatives to instruct them personally. Yamaraj approached them as a child, because a child is not restricted, but is granted admittance everywhere, even to the palace of a king. Besides this, the child was speaking philosophy. People are very much interested in hearing philosophy when it is spoken by a child. Interesting. That, so I think that's Rishinga Vilas has joined us. That, so we have text 37. Now Yamaraj speaks about fear of death. We don't know where we will go. That in the purport, Srila Prabhupada will explain what's the need for lamentation. Yamaraj said, alas, how amazing it is. These persons who are older than me have full experience that hundreds and thousands of living entities have taken birth and died. Thus they should understand that they are also up to die. Yet still they are bewildered. The conditioned soul comes from an unknown place and returns after death to that same unknown place. There is no exception to this rule, which is conducted by material nature. Knowing this, why do they usually lament? So, Lord Krishna said similar things to Arjuna. He said, you don't want to kill Bhishmadev, but does that mean Bhishmadev will not die? No, everyone will die. Sooner or later, that's the law of nature. Krishna says in Bhagavad Gita, one who takes birth is sure to die, and one who dies is sure to take birth. So, Srila Prabhupada writes in the purport, he quotes Bhagavad Gita 2:28. Yeah. Avyaktadini bhutani vyaktamatyani bharata avyakta nidanam yeva tatvaka paridevana. All created beings are manifest in their beginning, are unmanifested in their beginning, manifest in their interim state, and unmanifest again when they are annihilated. So what need is there for lamentation? I remember in the just before I joined the movement, I was the head of administration in a home for old people, very old people, 80, 90 years old. There were 108 of them. Of course, the death rate was there quite high, at least seen on a yearly basis. On a yearly basis, 1/3 of the residents would die. So every 2 days, every 2-3 days, someone was dying. So at that time, I was confronted every day practically with death. And I was reading the Bhagavatam at the same time. And yes, it wakes one up. Reading the Bhagavatam wakes one up if one is very dedicated to it. Because that is, yes, but the problem is that most people, even if they see someone dying, a relative and so on, then they may have a glimpse for a moment, yes, life is temporary. But then what do? They go back to their materialistic activities and they live like they will always live. Like we have that the Yaksha asked Maharaj Yudhishthira, what is the most amazing thing in the world? And Maharaj Parikshit mentioned that, yes, people are living like they never will die. They are eternal. They are making so many plans that so in the purport Srila Prabhupada writes, this material body has no factual existence in relation to the eternal soul. It's something like a dream. In a dream, we may think of flying in the sky or sitting on a chariot as a king, but when we wake up, we can see that we are neither in the sky nor seated on the chariot. At the end, the body of the king was manifested from an unmanifested source, and again it became unmanifested from manifestation. Since the manifestation exists only in the middle, between the 2 points of manifestation, why should one cry for the body manifested in the interim? But it's interesting, if one is full of lamentation, that's the mode of ignorance. And you can speak to such a person philosophy, but people cannot get it. They are not into hearing philosophy at that moment. You must be extremely qualified. But here we have Yamaraj is therefore taking the form of this young boy. And Srila Prabhupada said, yes, they will listen to a young boy. So that's interesting. Text 38. It is wonderful that these elderly women do not have a higher sense of life than we do. Indeed, we are most fortunate, for although we are children and have been left to struggle in material life, unprotected by father and mother, and although we are very weak, we have not been vanquished or eaten by ferocious animals. Thus we have firm belief that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who has given us protection even in the womb of the mother, will protect us everywhere. So that's surrender. So Prabhupada says, writes in the Prabhupada, Sarvadam Prishya Mamikam Sramvacha, give up all other duties and simply surrender unto me. One does not abide by the orders of the Supreme Personality of Godhead is given the facility to enjoy this material world. Yes. Instead of restricting him, the Lord gives the conditioned soul the opportunity to enjoy that so that by mature experience, after many, many births, Paunam Namante, he will understand that surrender to the lotus feet of Vasudev is the only duty of all living beings. So the boy continues the Lord, the boy addresses the women. O weak women, only by the will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, who is never diminished, is the entire world created, maintained, and again annihilated. This is the verdict of Vedic knowledge, that this material creation, consisting of the moving and non-moving, is exactly like his plating. Being the Supreme Lord is completely competent to destroy and protect. That's 39. In 39, I will read the purport that the theme here is nothing can happen without Krishna's desire. So in the purport, the Lord is always free, and therefore he can protect and also annihilate. It's not our order carrier. Whatever he likes, he will do. Therefore he is the Supreme Lord. The Lord does not create this material world on anyone's request, and therefore he can annihilate everything merely by his will. That is his supremacy. If one argues, why does he act in this way? The answer is that he can do so because he is supreme. No one can question his activities. If one argues, what is the purpose of this sinful creation and annihilation? The answer is that to prove his omnipotence, he can do anything, and no one can question him. If he were answerable to us concerning why he does something, why he does something, and why he does not, his supremacy would be curtailed. Now, there is a commentary on this verse. of Srila Jiva Goswami, 39. Commentary on 39. Just a moment. Yeah, we are there. So, Jiva Goswami writes, thus, in these words of Srimad Bhagavatam and also in Brahma's prayers, the conception of the Supreme as formless and having a form are compared. The idea that Lord Vishnu is an ordinary demigod is also criticized here. In these verses, the idea that the individual soul is the worshipable Supreme is forcibly refuted. Such an idea is laughed at by the pure devotees, such as the Yadavas laughed at the demon Pandraka, who pretended that he was Lord Vasudeva. Yes. So, of course, it is said further that for that same reason, pure devotees, they are not interested in personal liberation. So Jiva Goswami quotes the verse of the Bhagavatam 3:29-13. A pure devotee does not accept any liberation. Saloka Shaski Samipya Sarupya Vaikatva, even though they are offered by the Supreme Personality of Godhead. So that is like the demons, they imagine that, yes, after the death, you go to a place, an unknown place, and so that means you are gone, you are dead, and you never come back from it. So, like, that was also the conclusion of Hiranyakashipu when he wanted to kill Lord Vishnu. He was searching for Lord Vishnu everywhere. And he could not find him. So his conclusion was, he's dead. He's gone to that place from where no one returns. But where was Lord Vishnu? He was in his own heart. So Krishna is in the heart of everyone. But for the demoniac, they don't perceive that. That's interesting. So Hanuman explains, Shiva Goswami said, only a fool will give up service to the Lord and instead try to become the Lord. So that's impersonalist. Lord Krishna to Uddhav, Shiva Goswami quotes, because my devotees possess saintly behavior and deep intelligence, they completely dedicate themselves to me. They do not desire anything besides me. Indeed, even if I offer them liberation from birth and death, they do not accept it. Sridhar Swami comments. Here, the word dhira means intelligence, intelligent, and Mamaikantina means filled with love for me. The Lord says, even though I offer liberation to them, they will not accept it. But more to be said, they have no material desires. That's the meaning. They have no material desires, he says. The word apunarbhavan here means great liberation. Apuna Bhava. Yes. So this is the commentary of Shiva Goswami. That now we have text 40. So Yamaraj, in the form of a boy, continues. Sometimes one loses his money on a public street where everyone can see it, and yet his money is protected by destiny and not seen by others. Thus the man who lost it gets it back. On the other hand, if the Lord does not give protection, even money maintained very securely at home is lost. If the Supreme Lord gives one protection, even though one has no protector and is in the jungle, one remains alive, whereas a person well protected at home by relatives and others sometimes dies, no one being able to protect him. We will hear that Prahlad Maharaj, in his prayers to Lord Nrsimhadev in the 9th chapter of this canto, text 19, there will say, Palasyanaya saranam pitara nrsimha nartasya saradamudam patimachatana taptasya ta patividih yayan yasestas tavat vibhotan vitam tvakupekshitanam. That my Lord Nrsimhadev, because of the bodily conception of life, that people can not do anything for their betterment. Whatever remedies they want to apply, that although they may be temporarily beneficial, but they are impermanent. Like a father and mother is not guaranteed they can protect their child, or a physician can, with his medicine, may not be able to save the patient, or a boat on the ocean. There can be a big storm and the boat can be destroyed and the person drowns. So that we have our plans, we try to protect, but the ultimate protection is the Supreme Lord. So Papa writes in the purport, our plans to protect or annihilate do not act, but whatever he thinks of doing, or whatever the Lord thinks of doing, actually happens. And Srila Prabhupada quotes this verse also that we just quoted from the 9th chapter of this canto. Now, so it's also a Western theological problem. How can God and evil exist simultaneously? That if you accept that God is all good, and everything what he does must also be good, although we may not be able to understand that with our intelligence. That requires deep faith. That requires surrender. And that's what we are meant to develop. Here Yamaraj is speaking in this story, which is told to us by Hiranyakashipu. But now, text 41. Every conditioned soul receives a different type of body according to its work. And when an engagement is finished, the body is finished. Although the spirit soul is situated in subtle and gross material bodies in different forms of life, he is not bound by them, for he is always understood to be completely different from the manifested body. So unless we surrender to Krishna, we will be obliged to accept one type of body after another according to one's karma, sometimes as an animal, sometimes as a demigod. That But although the body is obtained and lost in due course, the spirit soul does not actually mix with that body. So that requires spiritual education. Spiritual education is meant to change one's consciousness so that one finally goes and surrenders to Krishna, which means carrying out his orders. And then one becomes free from material nature. That means we must invest the self. Now we are investing ourselves in objects, especially in this body. And we have created a certain of I-ness, that I am. And it's falsely based on the body or on the objects related to the body. But when I die, I cannot take these objects with me. And that cuts into the illusion when one becomes aware of that. Text. 42 and 43. Just as a householder, although different from the identity of his house, thinks his house to be identical with him, so the conditioned soul, due to ignorance, accepts the body to be in self, although the body is actually different from the soul. The body is obtained through a combination of portions of earth, water, fire, and when earth, water, fire are transformed in course of time, the body is vanquished. The soul has nothing to do with this creation and dissolution of the body. Text. As fire, although situated in wood, is perceived to be different as from the wood, as air, although situated in the mouth and nostrils, is perceived to be separate, and as the sky, although all-pervading, never mixed with anything, so the living entity, although now engaged within the material body, of which it is the source, is separated from it. So this is another example how the living entity is different from this body. In the purport it is said, as fire appears separate from wood, and as the air flowing through the nostrils and mouth of the body appears separate from the body, so the Paramatma, the Supreme Personality of Godhead, appears separate from the living entity, but is actually separate and not separate simultaneously. This is the philosophy of Asindhya Veda Veda Tattva propounded by Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. According to the reactions of karma, the living being appears separate from the Supreme Personality of Godhead, but actually he is very intimately related with the Lord. So we get only a complete understanding of the soul if we see the soul in relationship to Krishna. That's the point made here. These are also the teachings of Prahlad Maharaj, which we will hear. We appear to be separate from Krishna, but actually the soul is intimately related to Krishna. Therefore, under all circumstances, we should depend on Krishna. And now Yamaraj is going to use heavy words that Yamaraj continue. O lamenters, you are fools, he says. You are mudas, that the person named Sujahya, from whom your lament is still lying before you and has not gone anywhere, then what is the cause for lamentation? Previously he heard you and replied to you, but now finding him, you are lamenting. This is contradictory behavior. For you have never actually seen the person within the body who heard and replied to you. There is no need for your lamentation. For the body you have always seen is lying there. Once when I was the head of administration in this home for retired people, old people, an old man was dying, and I saw at the moment of death his eyes. I looked in his eyes, and it was like the light went out of his eyes, and the last breath came, and immediately his daughter started to cry and said, "He's gone, he's gone, he's gone." But why do they speak like that? He's gone. Then they realize it's not the body. Body is gone. That means they have, if he's gone and the body is still there, it means they never seen the person. But you explain that to them, they are so much in illusion, they cannot understand. That to understand these things is not just a question of the intelligence. You must get the mercy of Krishna to get that point. That I've seen so many things, contradictory behavior, it's mentioned here. When I was married, my ex-wife was fond of animals, and she would do everything to save animals. But she was a very good meat eater. And that's contradictory behavior. That people are the friends of the animals, but they eat them at the same time. That is not appropriate. And here we find also this contradictory behavior. Now, so in the last part of the purport of this verse, after death, when the breath within the nostrils has stopped, one can understand that the person within the body who was hearing and replying has now gone. Therefore, in effect, the common man concludes that actually the spirit soul was different from the body and has gone away. Thus, even a common man coming to his senses can know that the real person who was within the body and was hearing and replying was never seen. For what which was never seen, what is the need of lamentation? That's interesting purport of Prabhupada. So we think, so in the next verse, that we will hear how Yamaraj compares the soul with a cooperator. Interesting, in the introduction of Bhagavad Gita, Srila Prabhupada calls also the soul the cooperator. So everything Srila Prabhupada said, based on scriptures. I will hear you. In the body, the most important substance is the life air, but that also is neither the listener nor the speaker. Beyond even the life air, the soul also cannot do nothing, for the supersoul is actually the director in cooperation with the individual soul. The supersoul conducting the activities of the body is different from the body and life force. That in the purport, last part, Srila Prabhupada writes, although the individual soul possesses the indriyas or senses, is not actually the proprietor, for the proprietor is a supersoul. Consequently, the supersoul is called Rishikesh, and the individual soul is advised by the direction of the supersoul to surrender unto him and thus be happy. Thus, he can become immortal and be transferred to the spiritual kingdom, where we will achieve the highest success of eternal blissful life of knowledge. In conclusion, the individual soul is different from the body, senses, living force, and the airs within the body, and above him is the supersoul who gives the individual soul all facilities. So the individual soul who renders everything to the supersoul lives very happily within the body. So we think ourselves the doer, but we are depending on the supersoul at every moment. That when we make friends with the supersoul, we can live peacefully. But Iranyakasipu, it does not only neglect the supersoul, he wants to kill him. So we can only cooperate with the supersoul. Then we will be peaceful. That text 46. The 5 material elements, the 10 senses and the mind all combine to form the various parts of the gross and subtle bodies. The living entities come in contact with material bodies, whether high or low, and later gives them up by his personal prowess. This strength can be perceived in a living entity's personal power to possess different kinds of bodies. That so so one gets one body after another. And we try to get the things that we want to achieve in this life, but the body is not meant for this. That it is meant to help us to desire to go back to Godhead. The human form of life is variable. One can use his body to go to higher planetary systems, to Pitri-loka, or he can remain in lower planetary systems. But if one tries, he can also return back to Godhead, as Srila Prabhupada says. Little moment, we are still connected, but I don't see you now because the electricity fell out here. I will, therefore, I have to change my display. That takes just a moment, and I will see you again. Okay, there you are again. Yeah, still on the battery now. It's not easy here. I'm in Bulgaria, in a small village far away from the civilized world, I would say. But they have the internet, but it's not. But the electricity is going up and down. But still, we continue. That we were text 47. That's next. As long as the spirit soul is covered by the subtle body, consisting of the mind, intelligence, and false ego, he is bound to the result of his fruitive activities. Because of this covering, the spirit soul is connected with the material energy and must accordingly suffer material conditions and reversals, life after life. So that's all the spirit soul is covered by this subtle body. Mind, intelligence, false ego. So what's the solution, engage the mind in smaranam, thinking of Krishna, chanting, kirtanya sadahari. The purport Srila Prabhupada writes, I read 2 sentences. The duty of all human beings, therefore, is to keep the mind always engaged at the lotus feet of the Lord. Savaimana Krishna Padara Vindaro. When the mind is engaged at the lotus feet of Krishna, the intelligence is purified. And then the intelligence gets inspiration from the super soul, the Dhammi Buddhyogam Tam. Thus the living entity makes progress toward liberation from material bondage. That's so engaging the mind in always thinking of Krishna. Text 48. It is fruitless to see and talk of the material modes of nature and the resultant so-called happiness and distress as if they were factual. When the mind wanders during the day and a man begins to think himself extremely important, or when he dreams at night and sees a beautiful woman enjoying with him, these are merely false dreams. Similarly, the happiness and distress caused by the material senses should be understood to be meaningless. So the point here is happiness and distress are meaningless. That's on the Jnana level. And it's all manodharma, imagination. So the contemporary civilization is based on illusion, because the temporary has no meaning. That's the point. Bhagavad Gita, Krishna also explains what's durable is what's eternal, and what's temporary, yes, that is not, that is only temporary value. So a few lines at the end of the purport. Even if by fruitive activity of worship of the demigods one is elevated to higher planetary existence for sense enjoyment, its situation is condemned in Bhagavad Gita as antavad, perishable. The happiness one enjoys in this way is like the pleasure of embracing a young woman in a dream. If for some time it may be pleasing, but actually the basic principle is false. The mental concoctions of happiness and distress in this material world are compared to dreams because of their falseness. All thoughts of obtaining happiness by using the material senses have a false background and have no meaning. That now says my internet connection is unstable. It came up a few times, but I hope we will still be able to continue. Text 49. Those who have full knowledge of self-realization, who know well that the spirit soul is eternal, whereas the body is perishable, are not overwhelmed by lamentation. But persons who lack knowledge of self-realization certainly lament. Therefore, it is difficult to educate a person in illusion. It's difficult to educate a person in lamentation. They cannot hear anything. Of course, Arjuna was also lamenting, but Arjuna was under the Yoga Maya, Krishna's spiritual energy. And Prabhupada says about Arjuna that, yes, Arjuna is 1,000 more times qualified than all of us. So that's interesting. So in the purport, according to the Mimamsa philosophers, everything is eternal nitya. And according to the Sankhya philosophers, everything is mithya or anitya, impermanent. Nonetheless, without real knowledge of Atma, the soul, such philosophers must be bewildered and must continue to lament as sudras. That says you are currently sharing your display settings windows. Moment, I will change the share. That's probably due to the electricity which is off here now. No electricity in this place. Okay, should be okay now. Right, but my chat is gone. Yeah, and participants should be okay now. So according to the Mimamsa philosophers, yeah, I read this. Nonetheless, without real knowledge of Atma, the soul, such philosophers must be bewildered and must continue to lament as sudras. So there are many philosophers that, if the philosophy is not based on the fact that we are spirit soul, not a body, it's people, even after hearing this philosophy, will continue to lament. Like this is 15 years ago or longer, I was in Malaga. The temple president was a lady there. She was the Prabhupada disciple, but she lost her son. Her son died in a car accident, and she started to lament. But what she did is she decided, I will hear Prabhupada 24 hours a day, and she started to hear lectures of Prabhupada, and wherever she would go in the bathroom, the whole day she was hearing Prabhupada lectures. And 2-3 days she came out of lamentation. But you have to hear from the right person, the right philosophy. This is from the beginning of the second verse of the second canto, first chapter. Those who are materially engrossed, being blinded to knowledge of the ultimate truth, have many subjects for hearing in human society, O Emperor. So for ordinary persons engaged in material activities, there are many subject matters to understand, because such persons do not understand self-realization. One must therefore be educated in self-realization, so that under any circumstances in life, he will remain steady in his vow. So, if you don't know that you are a spirit soul different from this body, you cannot discriminate reality from illusion. We can't believe our mind. And what is the mind holding on? Our mind must become our friend, Krishna says. And a mind that is our friend means a mind attached to Krishna. So the mind becomes attached to one thing, and the next moment it rejects something else. Sanshalai Mana Krishna. And now it's interesting, of course, that now Yamaraj will tell a story. Interesting. Yeah, Kalsipu is telling a story, and in that story we have Yamaraj telling a story, and now Yamaraj is going to tell a story that so the electricity comes back here. Text 50. There was once a hunter who lured birds with food and captured them after spreading a net. He lived as if appointed by death personified as the killer of the birds. 51. While wandering in the forest, the hunter saw a pair of kulinga birds. Of the two, the female was captivated by the hunter's lure. O queens of Sujahya, the male kulinga bird, seeing his wife put into the greatest distress in the grip of Providence, became very unhappy. Because of affection, the poor bird, being unable to release her, began to lament for his wife. Alas, how merciless is Providence! My wife, unable to be held by anyone, is in such an awkward position and lamenting for me. What will Providence gain by taking away this poor bird? What will be the profit? If unkind Providence takes away my wife, who is half of my body, why should he not take me also? What is the use of my living with half of my body, bereft by loss of my wife? What shall I gain in this way? So the unfortunate baby birds, bereft of their mother, are waiting in the nest for her to feed them. They are still very small and have not yet grown their wings. How shall I be able to maintain them? I read the first paragraph of the purport. The bird is lamenting for the mother of his children, because the mother not only maintains and cares for the children. Yamaraj, however, in the guise of a small boy, has already explained that although his mother left him uncared for and wandering in the forest, the tigers and other ferocious animals had not eaten him. The real fact is that if the Supreme Personality of Godhead protects one, even though one be motherless and fatherless, one can be maintained by the goodwill of the Lord. Otherwise, if the Supreme Lord does not give one protection, one must suffer in spite of the presence of his father and mother. Another example is sometimes given. A patient dies in spite of a good physician. So again, that's that verse of Prahlad Maharaj that Srila Prabhupada is mentioning here, that because of the loss of his wife, the kulinga bird lamented with tears in his eyes, meanwhile following the dictations of mature time, the hunter, who was very carefully hidden in the distance, released his arrow, which pierced the body of the kulinga bird and killed him. Thus Yamaraj, in the guise of a small boy, told all the queens, "You are so foolish that you lament, but do not see your own death. Afflicted by a poor fund of knowledge, you do not even know that even if you lament for your dead husband for hundreds of years, you will never get him back. And in the meantime, your lives will be finished." Again here, yes, that's the same thing as Yudhishthira Maharaj answered to Yaksha, who asked what's the most wonderful thing in this world. So after telling this story, Hiranyakashipu will speak again. 58. Hiranyakashipu said, while Yamaraj, in the form of a small boy, was instructing the relatives surrounding the dead body of Sujahya, everyone was struck with wonder by his philosophical words. They could understand that everything material is temporary, not continuing to exist. So, after instructing all the foolish relatives of Sujahya, Yamaraj, in the form of a boy, disappeared from their vision. Then the relatives of King Sujahya performed ritualistic funeral ceremonies. Therefore, none of you should be aggrieved for the loss of the body, whether your own or those of others. Only in ignorance does one make boldly distinctions. Who am I? Who are others? What is mine? What is for others? So this is the bodily conception. One becomes interested in Dharma, Artha, Kama, Moksha. Dharma, religiosity, one uses to get Artha, wealth, and fulfill one's desires, and one desires free from suffering. But of course, if one understands this philosophy, one's definition of good and bad changes. There's a difference between materialist and spiritualist. It's a long purpose, but I'm reading just 2 parts of it. As long as human society is in darkness and ignorance, man will continue to make huge arrangements in the body conception of life. This is described by Prahlad Maharaj as bharam. In the materialistic conception, modern civilization makes enormous arrangements for huge roads, houses, mills, factories, and this is man's conception of advancement of civilization. People do not know, however, that at any time they themselves may be kicked out of the scene and forced to accept material bodies. To accept bodies that have nothing to do with these enormous houses, palaces, roads, and automobiles. Therefore, Arjuna was thinking in terms of the body relationship with his kinsman. Krishna immediately chastised, saying, Kutastva kashmalam idam vishame samapastitam. The body conception of life is befitting the Anaryas, the non-Aryans, who are not advanced in knowledge. At the end of the purport is that as long as we are in the human form of life, our duty is to understand the soul within the body. The body is not the self, we are different from the body. And there is no question of friends, enemies, responsibilities in terms of body conception of life. One should not be very anxious about the body's changing from childhood to youth to boyhood, from boyhood to old age, and then apparent annihilation. Then we have the last verse. So materialist and spiritualist, they think differently. They think of each other to be mad. But yes, we must, at the end of the purport, Srila Prabhupada makes the point, we need to fly our airplane alone. So one should surely know that whether one has many friends or many enemies, his friends cannot help him, and his enemies cannot do any harm. At the end, in all circumstances, everyone, as a spirit soul, must be a devotee of Lord Vishnu, and should be not be concerned with bodily relationships, whether friends or his enemies. One should know that neither we ourselves nor our enemies in the bodily conception of life are ever killed. What's the conclusion here? The conclusion is detachment of the material world, and that detachment is a result of jnana. So this is strong preaching of detachment by Hiranyakashipu. And in the next chapter, he will act completely contradictory to the philosophy that he's preaching here. That's interesting. At the end, we have again, in the last verse, Narada Muni speaking. Narada Uvacha, iti detya pate vakyam, Titir Akarnya Sasnuna Putra Sukam Kashanat Kyaktva Tatvishitam Adarayat. Sinarad Muni continued, Titi, the mother of Hiranyakasipu and Hiranyaksa, heard the instructions of Hiranyakasipu, along with her daughter-in-law, Rushabhanu, Hiranyaksa's wife. She then forgot her grief over her son's death and thus engaged her mind and attention in understanding the real philosophy of life. So this is good for preaching of detachment, these verses. We have also heard before the story of Chitraketu, his own son telling him, yes, that yes, you are my father and mother. I had so many fathers and mothers that when his son left his body and by the power of Narada Muni, the body came again to life and the spirit soul spoke directly these words and he woke up. So it's important this is a part of our making advancement. Hearing about the fertility of the material world, one part, and the other part is becoming attached to Krishna. So to end, I will read the last purport of Prabhupada. When a relative dies, one certainly becomes very much interested in philosophy, but when the funeral ceremony is over, one again becomes attentive to materialism. Even Daityas, who are materialistic persons, sometimes think of philosophy when some relative meets death. The technical term for this attitude of the materialistic person is smasana bharagya, or detachment in a cemetery or place of cremation. As confirmed in Bhagavad Gita, 4 classes of men receive an understanding of spiritual life and God. Artha, the distressed, Jignasu, the inquisitive, Artharti, one who desires material gains, and Jnani, one who is searching for knowledge. Especially when one is very much distressed by material conditions, one becomes interested in God. Therefore, Kunti Devi said in her prayers to Krishna that she preferred the distress to a happy mood of life. In the material world, one who is happy forgets Krishna or God. But sometimes, if one is actually pious but in distress, he remembers Krishna. Kunti Devi therefore preferred distress because it is an opportunity for remembering Krishna. When Krishna was leaving Kunti Devi for his own country, Kunti Devi regretfully said that he was better off in distress because Krishna was always present, whereas now that the Pandavas were situated in their kingdom, Krishna was going away. For a devotee, distress is an opportunity to remember the Supreme Personality of Godhead constantly. This ends the Bhaktivedanta purpose of the 7th canto, 2nd chapter of the Srimad Bhagavatam, entitled Hiranyakasipu, King of the Demons. So this is the second chapter of the 7th canto, and I have some questions for you. But first, it is now 5:21. We will have a pause till 5:30 p.m., 17:30. We will come back and then we will have a discussion. Thank you very much. Hare Krishna. So we are back. I'll put the first question for you on the screen. What is the role of providence within our lives? By providence, so many things happen which we don't want or which come unexpectedly. So what does that mean for us devotees. Someone wants to answer this question. Yes, Anand Kaur Prabhu, please speak.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So for devotees, we understand that it is Krishna's will, and we understand that via the media of Providence, Krishna is ultimately giving the results of our own actions in a very minute form. And we accept it as Krishna's grace and further increase our surrender towards the Lord. Tattenu susimekshmano. So that is how we take up the will of the Providence.
Okay. That is certainly a valid perspective. Someone else has further comments, other perspectives. Mother Hema Gopi writes, man proposes, God disposes. So we are not a controller. That's certainly another perspective. That any further comments? If not, let's see what the answer is I gave. The purpose of Providence is to let us understand that since everything is dependent on the free will of the Supreme Personality of Godhead, our only duty is to surrender to Him and seek His protection. So that's the point Prabhupada makes in the purpose. It's a bit different. Yeah, Ramakrishna Das writes, yes, all such lessons are for us to understand that the Supreme Lord is the controller. But Srila Prabhupada goes further. He says, yes, he's the Supreme Controller. Then what do? You surrender to the Supreme Controller and seek his protection. Good. So, see that. Bimla Prasad, you have a question? Ask your question, please.
Yes, Hare Krishna Maharaj. Thank you very much, Maharaj. Since this topic, I was just like reading again, and this struck me. The kind of preaching which we see here, like even Hiranyakashipu doing the same thing, and in another sense, Yamaraj is also doing the same kind of preaching. This example of like Ushiner and this Kulinga Bhav. So I was thinking about the application part. So say for example, there are times when we are we not invited, we actually go to places where there is like somebody has died. So like to console the families. So like many times it so happens that we go to a place where the dead body is there. And may not be all, and it is quite possible that not all the family members or the people gathered around might not be devotees. So what kind of like preaching can possibly we do, like just like here we see the kind of preaching Hiranyakashipu is doing to his family, or Yamaraj is doing to the Ushinar's family. So what would be the best policy? Because what would be a good preaching strategy?
The thing is that at a funeral, everyone is in a mood of lamentation. We have heard here that Yamaraj is saying, when who is in lamentation, you cannot educate such a person. So that's not a moment to preach heavily. That you have to be careful with that, because if we preach heavily, that may be seen as insensitivity.
Yes,
like we had, it was 2 days ago, Prabhupada's disappearance. And I was reading for the devotees here about the last days, the last hours before Srila Prabhupada left practically. And Srila Prabhupada was asking for forgiveness to everyone. And he said, yes, I've been insensitive in my preaching. He said, I called people rascals, and the devotee said, no, Prabhupada, you were saving millions in this world. You have not committed offense. But then Srila Prabhupada said, yes, I was preaching in one hand the Bhagavatam and in the other a club. So it is not easy to preach according to time, place, and circumstances. It requires experience, but at such occasion, personally, I would not preach, but be very kind to them, and invite them. You come to see us later, and so on. And then when they come later, then you can not with the club, but casually let them. Yeah. You can inform them about Bhagavad Gita and so on. But we need to wait for the right circumstances. It's a very important point. Thank you for bringing that up.
Thank you much. I just wanted to seek another clarification on this. So as we see here, when Yamaraj is preaching, and somehow like this is being effective also, like the queens, they heed to his advice, like they at least, listening. So can we deduce from this that it also depends on the strength, individual strength of the preacher?
Of course, Yamaraj is not an ordinary preacher, but one reason was given here. It took the form of a child. And all these women, they like to hear from a child. And therefore, by that trick of taking the form of a child, he got their attention. So that's also a point to consider. All right?
Thank you very much. Thank you very, very much.
So we have on the screen Yamaraj's teachings. So what's the essence of his teachings? The body is only temporary covering of the soul. There is no reason to lament for the loss of the body. Similarly, the happiness and distress caused by the material senses should be understood to be meaningless. When one is self-realized, one doesn't lament. So that means Yamaraj is pointing out it is caused by ignorance, this lamentation. And Srila Prabhupada in the first purport, second chapter of Bhagavad Gita, first verse, he says, yes, that lamentation is a sign for ignorance of the soul. So why did the young boy consider as meaningless both happiness and distress? Someone wants to answer that question? Please raise your hand. Why did the young boy consider as meaningless both happiness and distress? And he gave even analogies, examples that someone remembers them. Do we all think that happiness and distress in this world is meaningful? So please. I hope someone knows the answer. Yes, Bimal Prashad, yeah? You have to unmute.
Yeah, sorry. Yes, Maharaj. Just like the example is given in the translation itself, that when the mind wanders, because the happiness resistance is basically experienced by the mind, and the mind is flickering. So sometimes during the day it acts in one way, at night it acts in another way. So basically that's why like it actually has no meaning, because it's temporary and it is perceiving the modes of material nature in terms of happiness and distress.
Yeah. So thank you. Ravi Gopal Prabhu, he gives an additional, he refers to the analogy given. He says, the body happiness and distress is temporary, like happiness of a dream. That, yes, that, of course, Srinivas Gopal Matras first counter Ashitusna Sukha Dukkha, that is how we overcome it. That's the process. Krishna Prabhu writes, the mental concoctions of happiness and distress in this material world are compared to dreams because of their falseness. All thoughts of obtaining happiness by using the material senses have false background and therefore have no meaning. They are all merely false dreams. Yes, that is the essence. But do we realize that? Are you sometimes happy in this world and sometimes distressed? That it's not easy to overcome. Someone tells you something that you don't want to hear, and you will feel distress. Mother Hema Gopi, please speak.
Hare Krishna Maharaj.
Hare Krishna.
I have a question. May I ask Maharaj?
Yes, sure.
We believe that our understanding is material world is temporary but real. So how can the happiness, if we say everything is false, then we can also say happiness is false also. But if we say that everything in this material world is temporary but real, then happiness should also be considered something similar, like it should also feel like real.
Yeah, the illusion is that we take the temporary as valuable. That's the illusion. That we take the temporary as valuable or long-lasting, and that is really the issue. That so the temporary has only relative value, but we are eternal. That's not what the soul wants. The soul wants to be in the spiritual world eternally, serving Krishna. That yes, if we lose the body, what is the value of all these temporary things? But the people forget that they will lose the body, and they remain attached to it. Therefore, we have here Yamaraj concluding, the happiness and distress caused by the material senses should be understood to be meaningless. They are like happiness and distress in a dream. A dream is over, yes, and the happiness and distress in the dream is gone. We leave this body, and happiness and distress in this lifetime is gone. That's the use. The happiness, so that's the illusion. That it's not that the material energy is not real, but it's temporary. And taking it as valuable, that's illusion. That's the point. The happiness one enjoys in this way is like the pleasure of embracing a young woman in a dream. For some time it may be pleasing, but actually the basic principle is false. The mental concoctions of happiness and distress in the material world are compared to dreams because they are of falseness. All thoughts of obtaining happiness by using the material senses have a false background and therefore have no meaning that we are not the body. And using and thinking that the pleasure the body gets is our pleasure, that's illusion. We are not the body. It's not easy to understand. We hear this philosophy. And even if you understand it, applying it is very difficult because the influence of the three modes, they are forcing you to act in this illusion. Because the three modes are causing this illusion. Therefore, we should always be engaged in Krishna consciousness and never seek happiness and distress. And that's a teaching that Prahlad Maharaj will bring here. He will tell us clearly, don't try to be happy in this world. From the moment you try to become happy in this world, that's the beginning of your unhappiness. You say, when you stop trying to become happy in this world, striving for happiness, your real happiness, the real happiness of the soul begins. And that's a red line in this teaching of Prahlad Maharaj. So we will end with the last point here is the example of the Kulinga birds. Can someone explain what's the moral of the story of this Kulinga birds? What do we learn from it? You can, yeah, Anand Kaur Sundar Prabhu.
Hare Krishna Maharaj. So the main lesson from the story is that our lives are also temporary. So while we lament for other people who have gone, we forget the real fact that we also have to die very quickly. So we should take the human form of life very, very seriously and utilize it for self-realization.
That's certainly one aspect that we can learn from it. But there are also other angles of vision, other lessons we can learn. You can also write in the chat. So Bimla Prasad, you want to say something?
Yes, Maharaj, another aspect as I figured out is when we're talking about the Kulinga bug is talking about the attachment between like man and woman, attachment in the material world. And that attachment actually blinds us to the obvious and the stark reality, just like as you say, like Pashanapina Pashati. He saw this, the male bird saw the like how his wife died, and still he couldn't learn any lesson than this death waiting for him. Other than running away from that place, it kept sitting there lamenting till he himself was shot by the hunter. So it's the same way, like excessive attachment that leads to, and that kind of attachment is unfortunately also glorified in the material world. It's like this attachment is also very much glorified. This usual, just many poems and theme of many, like love songs, ballads. But this basically is what causes his ultimate blindness, leads him to his death, and he wastes his chance to, like, for salvation. In that sense.
Yes, sure. That's the general understanding. Ravi Gopal Prabhu mentions lamentation for material attachment and things waste us time, brought us to death without realizing the spiritual destination, like birds also fallen to death. Because Srila Prabhupada, in the 11th canto, you will learn about the 24 ghosts. And there you have the example of two pigeons. And it's the same story as the Kulinga bird, exactly the same. But in another lecture, Srila Prabhupada uses this and he says, yeah, that the pigeon sees one's wife is captured, his wife is captured, the she pigeon, and also the little birds, and then the bird, the other pigeon, the male pigeon, does takes the intelligent solution. He said, "Oh yes, now it's time to take sannyas," and he announces, instead of also be captured, also going to an illusion and also to be captured. That so Mother Shalangi writes, if we lament, one cannot bring back our departed loved ones, and our own lives will be finished soon. Why waste time? That's an argument made also there, that lamentation is thus useless. We can understand that with our intelligence. So why do we do it? That so Ramakrishna Prabhu writes, as Yudhishthira stated, that a man of this world are oblivious to the fact that we all have to give up bodies, but we are attached due to affection based on bodily relations. This blinds us from our real vision of self-realization. Time wasted is time lost, and we are short-lived, cannot afford to waste a moment without time, without Krishna consciousness. That is really what Prahlad Maharaj will tell his schoolmates. Don't waste time. Maharaj Prabhu writes, one is oneself so vulnerable. How can one protect others? Yes, that was the Balasya Niyas Renam Pitaravan Shinga 7919. We will hear that Prahlad will speak about that in the 9th chapter. Instead, one should prepare for death. Let us see on the screen here what's the answer which was in the purpose of the Bhagavatam. Thus Yamaraj, in the guise of a small boy, told all the queens, you are also foolish that you lament, but do not see your own death. Afflicted by a poor fund of knowledge, you do not know that even if you lament your dead husband for hundreds of years, you will never get him back alive. In the meantime, your lives will be finished. And the purport we have, yes, Ayanya ahani bhutani kachantiha yamalayam sesastarvanamichanti kimacharyam ataparam. That so hundreds and thousands of living entities meet death at every moment, but a foolish living entity nonetheless thinks himself deathless and does not prepare for death. This is the most wonderful thing in this world, and that's the big illusion, and it's all pervading. So we will Navadvip Prabhu, please speak.
Maharaj, I have a general question regarding some of the concepts mentioned here. For example, in text 40, there's a nice example given about money is lost in the street, but a person still retrieves it, even though they put no effort into looking after it. But then sometimes someone protects money very carefully in the home and it is lost, stolen. And then there's this other example given of protection, that sometimes one remains alive and healthy in the jungle, but sometimes one puts all efforts into protecting themselves, but they fail. So that is a very philosophical argument, which is made many times by Narad Muni especially, and others. But practically, the experience of most people in the world is diametrically the opposite. That when a person goes to work, they earn some money. When they don't go to work, they don't earn money. When they try to protect themselves, whether it's their body or their health, they have some success. Persons who disregard their own protection or they disregard their own health often suffer, materially speaking. So my question is, there's a little bit of confusion here as to the very strong connection that from direct experience in this world, that our actions do have a result. Whereas here, it is suggesting that actually whatever actions you do, the result is something else, and it is determined by the Supreme Lord. So then, I mean, there's a whole range of questions which follow this that we can then start to avoid doing actions. But then even spiritually, we receive many instructions where we are asked to carry out certain actions, such as Prabhupada does advise us to protect our body, not to take foolish risks. He says sometimes when it rains, you carry an umbrella. It doesn't mean you do nothing. So maybe can you add some clarity to this? It's quite a confusing concept.
All the points that you made would suggest that we are the doer. But that's a problem. Narada Muni, he met Vejari the hunter, and he told Vejari the hunter that says, why are you killing these animals half? They are suffer so much. You will suffer a lot of that in the future. And he gave him a vision how he would suffer. And then Vejari the hunter said, yes, that can I prevent that in the future, this suffering? And Narada Muni said, yes, I will tell you, but first you have to break your bow. And Vejari the hunter said, breaking my bow? How will I live? It's by my work that I'm eating the same things you are saying now. All the points are the same root. In the purport, Srila Prabhupada writes that you find that in Chaitanya Charitamrita. He says, Vejari the hunter thinks that he's maintaining himself by his work. But factually, that's not so. Everyone is maintained by Krishna's mercy. Krishna is maintaining everyone. So that's our big illusion. And that's a big illusion. Of course, you work and you get results according to your karma. But your karma is predestined. You take birth and it's already fixed. Nothing you can do about it. That you will work and you get a result. And that is all predestined. So our lives means that we get experience in these lives as reactions to our previous lives. And we think we are working, and it's by our effort. But at the same time, it does not mean that you don't have to work. I don't work and my karma will come. That like, I will get my food, they will put it in my mouth. No, you have to do a minimum of activity, Srila Prabhupada said. If you want prasad, you must go to the place where they serve prasad. But that's one thing. A second point here is, and that's also important, is that Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, one must do one's duty. We should not work just for our maintenance. We should work out of duty for Krishna. Our motivation must be different. Because if we work to get our food, that's illusory. Because Krishna is the maintainer. And this is not easy to understand in our conditioned state. It requires some deep thought and some experience in life. That when I was traveling, I went to so many places before the pandemic history. I went to so many places. And every time I was worrying, am I going to be able to pay for my flights, for my travel, and so on? Krishna always arranged so that just enough. Last time, when I came from Canada, I received donations, but I got 500 British pounds too short to pay for my ticket. I came at the airport and they told me, we have overbooked. We want to put you on an earlier flight. And we will give you a compensation of 500 pounds. Now, who is doing that? It's Krishna. So that surrender to Krishna. To experience, you must surrender. Some surrender must be there. And that's wonderful in the mission of Prabhupada. You get that experience how Krishna takes care of you, but the reality is he takes always care of you, of all living entities, but especially for his devotees. Anyway, that is an important point, and our time is over, and I'm very happy that I've been that I could serve you in that way. So I look forward to see you again. We will be together again, if Krishna willing, in January for a part of the last 14 chapters of the 8th canto. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Maharaj. Thanks a lot for your
Very much.
Hare Krishna. Jai
Thank you
Prabhupada.
very much, Maharaj.
Thank
Jai
you,
His Holiness
Maharaj.
Thank you very much,
Bhaktivedanta
Maharaj.
Maharaj ki Jai.
Thank you, Maharaj.
Hare Bol.